13.
Cool.
Yeah, so this will be number 14. But yeah, man, how you doing?
Good, man. Been super busy, but no complaints.
Yeah.
Grateful. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, you're killing it. Are we good? Sweet, we're going. We're right into it, dude.
Cool.
GORECAST 2.0, man. This is awesome. This is my first one in Austin, so I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to sit down with me, man.
Yeah, man. It was.
I knew we met in a barbecue line.
Yeah,
Funny enough.
yeah.
And we started talking about what each other does and stuff, and I'm like, I do a bunch of random stuff that doesn't necessarily get me paid yet, but someday maybe. But and then you start talking about what you do, and it was really interesting to me. Kind of how you were doing the sobriety coach thing, and like kind of how that journey came about for you. So I'm just curious if I guess you can just get into it, like tell people who you are and like what your kind of experience was getting into being a coach and doing sobriety stuff. So how did you get into that?
Good question, man. It's been a pretty wild and crazy journey. First, I want to say thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely,
I appreciate it, man. But yeah, I got into coaching shortly, like pretty much right after I quit drinking and decided to get sober. I got the opportunity to work with a coaching company to run their marketing, and inevitably very quickly became a coach with them. And that's how I got out here in Austin. So I was living in Southern California in Orange County, and I just quit drinking, and I was about to turn 30. And then I got this opportunity to work in a coaching environment, and coaching is something I always wanted to do. I think I kind of realized that or discovered that like when I was 17 or 18, because I had gotten into the whole world of like personal development and all that stuff.
Life coaching or specifically sobriety coaching?
No, life coaching. Okay. Yeah, but at the time I didn't really think like coaching was a real viable like career field, and it's just because I was young, and I think maybe just I didn't have the context and knowledge or experience, but inevitably working in that coaching environment and seeing like, dude, coaching is like a real thing. It's transformational, changes people's lives. Like people's businesses grow 300 to 500% in 90 days when they get around the right mentors and frameworks. And so
just coaching overall.
Yeah. And then I kind of fell into the sobriety coaching thing, like in April, when I started a TikTok.
April this year?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I left that company like December, was doing my own thing for a little while, and then started posting about my sobriety, and it just kind of took off. And I told myself I wanted to get away from marketing because that's what I'd done for 8 years.
Right.
Once
Which really just if you're talking about like being around a crowd of people that like to go out and get drunk and do shit, marketing people are probably the worst influence, right? A lot of them they like to party.
Yeah, the marketing tech space.
Yeah,
they love to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing that when I was telling a couple friends of mine that like I'm bringing the podcast back, I'm gonna have somebody on here that he's like a sobriety coach. They're like, that's what he does for money. I think a lot of people are curious how. Like, what's the pay structure? If you're comfortable talking about it, I mean, we don't need to know how much money, but like, how does somebody become a sobriety coach on their own and get paid to do it? You know what I mean? Like, do you have people like paying you monthly to be their coach, or like, how does that work out?
Yeah. I really look at it as like, sobriety and life coaching together, because when you look at sobriety coaching, it's not just about like, when it comes to quitting drinking, physically not drinking is like 10% of it.
Right.
Or you would think 50% of it, right? Like just don't pick up a drink. But for people who have a problematic relationship with alcohol, it's so much deeper, right? Drinking and developing a problematic relationship to alcohol where you're either an alcoholic or you have alcohol use disorder, that's the very end result of something much, much deeper. So it's usually rooted in a lot of psychological or emotional distress, some childhood trauma, maybe, they had a relationship that was really abusive, right? And so there's a million different reasons as to why somebody turns to alcohol. And so it's not just about the accountability of like, okay, you're not going to drink anymore. It's about working with somebody on a really deep level to identify, okay, why were we drinking in the first place? Oftentimes it has a cause in trauma and a dysregulation in our nervous system. So it's helping people learn how to better learn how to discharge their emotions, how to become more emotionally resilient, how to increase their tolerance to stress.
How to not turn to substance. Is it alcohol specifically that you
do?
Okay, so it's very specific.
Yeah.
So how to basically handle situations better mentally and
mentally,
not have to go, I need a drink.
Yeah, mentally,
whatever.
emotionally, all those things. Like learning how to handle stress. Like what are the stories? What are the mental models? What are our frameworks for how we view ourselves? What's our confidence? What's our self-esteem? How do we feel about the future? How do we feel about other people? Are we distrustful of other people? Do we feel like the world is out to get us?
So you're almost like you're like a therapist too then.
It's like a combination of everything.
Okay.
I think that the two differences between therapy and coaching is that, therapy is sort of like rear view mirror based, whereas coaching, I look at it as present moment to future based, right? So in a therapeutic setting, you'll sit down and you'll talk to your therapist about what happened last week and how you feel about that and how that made you feel and how you could look at it differently, right? So it's really
past
digging
tense.
into the past, yeah. Whereas coaching is like, okay, we definitely want to address the past because we want to look at the underlying issues and begin reframing our perspectives around all of that, the inner child healing, the relationship with our family and parents, the love we didn't receive, right? It's like alcohol in developing a problematic relationship, alcohol is like not even the problem, right? So it's about being able
things
to
that cause you to drink.
Yeah, it's about being able to help somebody totally redefine their entire map of reality, right? Because most people, their map of reality is fairly limited, especially if they grew up in a dysfunctional family where maybe there is abuse in terms of alcohol or physical or emotional abuse, right? And then it causes a lot of trauma and dysregulation in their nervous system. So they're constantly living in maybe a high stress state or fight or flight, right? And so it really is about helping somebody totally redefine their relationship to themselves as well as the world.
Right. Okay. And so it's like this, if you try to just attack it from I'm going to try not to physically drink, that's not enough.
Yeah. And everybody does that. They try to do it, right? And they get a week sober or 2 weeks sober, or maybe they do a 30-day dry run, but then inevitably they find themselves drinking again, right? And it's hard to escape. Like our culture is so, I mean, you know it, right? It's woven into the fabric of everything that we do.
Well, and especially, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here is, I'm in the metal band and stuff. And so being around that whole scene, going to shows, a lot of times a month, going out, and especially for touring musicians, like alcoholism is a huge problem. And I mean, I don't know I wanted to ask you, I guess, what's your opinion on people that think like, some people that are like advocates for sobriety, they think like I've heard this perspective before that like everyone has a problem, like it's just a problem in general. Drinking is just negative, and like everyone has a problem even if they say they don't. You know what I mean? Because I consider myself I don't know, a self-aware drinker where like I know that I'm always in my head being like I need to make sure I'm not like drinking every day, right? Because I know how bad it can be. I've seen people. I just had a friend like the week I moved down here, I didn't even know he was in like treatment for alcohol. He's a longtime friend of mine. He like passed away randomly, which is devastating. And I guess what I've gathered, I still don't know everything about what happened, but what I've gathered is that he was struggling with alcoholism, and then it just like, I guess it was maybe like an Amy Winehouse kind of thing, or where he just knew that if he drank again, he would, he probably wouldn't make it, and then that happened. So, I wanted to get the word out, basically talk to you and see if maybe people could grab something from this conversation. We have a lot of like metal kids, metal followers, people that go out to shows a lot, and they're always getting drunk, and there's maybe some people that are struggling. But I guess the question I have for you is like, this question I'm trying to ask is like, do you think that everyone struggles with alcoholism, or do you think it's a specific type of person, that struggles? Or do you think if you drink at all, you're struggling with alcoholism? Is there a happy medium, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. And I think that's a common one that everybody has, right? And so there's a few different ways to look at it. So when it comes to alcohol use, there's a spectrum, right? So traditionally, the term that everybody kind of coined in the medical community and everybody thought was like an alcoholic, right? And so everybody has that coin of or that perception of what an alcoholic is. You're drinking every day out of a brown paper bag. You're drinking to cope. Like it's doesn't, it's a struggle, right? Everybody knows it. It's a problem. And so a lot of people think that as long as I'm not that, I'm okay, right?
Right. So like the bar is set really high.
Yeah, right. And
it has an alcoholic.
Yeah, and it has a really also negative connotation to it, right? And so everybody I talk to, including myself when I was struggling, was like, nobody wants to label themselves as an alcoholic, because then that means so many different things, right? They're powerless, or they don't have control,
Right.
or they lost control of their life, whatever.
Or even worse, people do it jokingly. I have a lot of people that, well, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of people that, like, poke fun at it.
Yeah, they like wear it as like a badge, right?
Or, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so the other term that the medical community, it's somewhat of a newer term, is alcohol use disorder. And so alcohol use disorder falls on a spectrum. So it could be, right, and it can show up in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. I don't think every single person who drinks has a problem with alcohol, right? I think there's different sort of tiers of people. If you're drinking a few times a year, or, if you drink, let's say, 1 to 2 beers a week and you feel the buzz, you're like, okay, I'm good, and you can stop and you have pretty much full control over it, then I think, like, enjoy, do your thing, But if you notice that alcohol, if you have less control over it, let's say when you start drinking, you find it hard to stop, or maybe you don't even drink all the time, or it's not a high frequency, but when you drink once a month, you go on a bender and you black out. Right. So there's so many different ways it can show up. The thing with alcohol to always realize, and this is just because of the lack of education and awareness, is that alcohol is incredibly physically and emotionally addictive because of the fact that it secretes so much dopamine in the brain, which is that feeling of euphoria that you get after a couple drinks, right? When scientists or medical professionals are measuring the addictive potential of a substance or activity, they look at the brain and how much dopamine it produces. So cocaine at the very top, sex, porn, gambling, alcohol, they all secrete way more dopamine than what you would normally get in normal every day-to-day life.
Right, from exercising. Even,
from exercising, going outside
getting
and
a
walking your
compliment.
dog. Yeah, for sure, right? And so I think it ultimately has to do with the person, right? Every person has to be able to look in the mirror and ask and ask the question themselves, like, do I feel like, who am I? What do I want? What do I feel like my potential is in life? And do I feel like alcohol is slowing me down? I think that's the question we need to ask, right? Based off of who I conceive in my mind to be the version of Bardia, who I know I'm capable of being, or the version of Taylor, is alcohol slowing me down from getting there? And if the answer is yes, then at that point, and if you're being honest with yourself, you may want to reconsider redefining your relationship to it, or look at doing something in order to manage it, right? And again, that's a personal question. There's a lot of people who are fine with it. They wake up, they go to work, and they come home and they drink, and like that's their relief and that's their getaway. And it's like they say they're perfectly happy doing that. And if you are, like, more power to you. Like,
do you think that ends up snowballing for most people, or for
always,
a lot of them? Like it'll if you think that you're kind of like a functioning alcoholic or a functioning alcohol overuser, whatever kind of label you want to put on it, like it eventually is going to lead to, like, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's like a 9 out of 10 times it is.
Yeah.
I would say 99%. And the reason is because alcohol is a very aggressive drug, but people don't realize that, and it's not marketed that way. We've been socially engineered within our culture and through music and television and music and across everything for alcohol to be just this cool, fun, relaxing thing. But again, the way it disrupts your neurochemistry is pretty insane, right? And so when you're exogenously getting a substance
what does that word mean?
From outside.
Oh, okay.
From outside.
Sorry.
So when you're drinking a substance like alcohol and it floods your brain with dopamine in a way that's not natural, one, it damages the dopamine receptor sites, and it begins to lower your baseline level of dopamine, right? So let's say we have our baseline here at eye level. When you consistently drink alcohol, and your brain and physiology and body realizes that, hey, we're getting these dopamine spikes from this substance.
Source.
Yeah, from the source, the lower your natural baseline lowers. And so for people who tend to drink a lot or pretty frequently, they start to when you have lower levels of dopamine, you're less motivated to do normal everyday activities, right? Like everything seems like you're dragging ass.
Hang
with
out
it.
with friends, build relationships, go to work,
work
out,
really push yourself,
Yeah.
evolve, right? And so when you have those lower levels of dopamine, you have lower levels of motivation in general, but then everything else seems a little bit more dull or boring unless there's alcohol, right? So you start to build a tolerance to it, right? And so when you start to build a tolerance, dopamine levels continue to drop. Everything continues to get more dull and boring. You start to slowly prioritize the alcohol over everything else because you're literally training your system to get reward from this substance, right?
Like, what do you guys are going to go do something somewhere where there's not drinks? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't sound that cool,
doesn't
right?
sound that
And then slowly but surely, and the thing about alcohol is that it's a slow burn drug. Right? When you're 20 or 25, you don't realize it because you still feel invincible at that point in your life. But it's like, alcohol and cigarettes are the same. It's like, it's not going to cause cancer the second year or the fifth year or even the 10th year. But slowly but surely, I mean, it's like there's the way you kind of have to think about alcohol is that there's an opportunity cost. There's no free lunch in nature. Right. And so what you're doing is by drinking a substance that artificially produces all this euphoria and dopamine in your brain, it doesn't come for free. There's a cost to it.
There's a cost,
right? And so
I like that. You said there's no free lunch in nature.
Yeah, there's no free lunch in nature. You know, that was a quote by this guy named Tim Ferriss who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek. But I heard him say that and I'm like, wow, it's so true. You can't continually expect to feel extra good today and not have the consequences down the line, right? And so with alcohol, there's consequences across the full gambit, right? So like number one, the money, right? I just hit 2 years of sobriety on Wednesday and I input my sobriety date into this app and I put in over 2 years how much money I was spending per week, how many extra calories I was consuming, and how many hours I was spending drinking or hungover. And in 2 years, I saved like $7,800. I saved 196,000 calories, and I gained back like 2,500 hours of productivity. Right? And
that's
so
nuts.
Yeah, it's wild. And so
what's this app called so people can look that up?
It's called Nomo, Nomo.
Nomo.
Yeah, and so you put in like your sobriety date and then you can track like all those different metrics and then it'll add up the milestones. But the thing to realize is that it's just opportunity cost, right? And so if we drink today, it's at the expense of tomorrow to some degree. Maybe not if you have one or two, but even if you do have one or two, you're going to wake up a little bit less energetic, a little bit slower, but let's just look at the reality. Most people in their 20s and 30s, maybe not most, but the people who are involved with consistently going out, the bar scene, like they're usually not just having one or two.
No.
Right?
No.
And so that starts to compound. And the thing is that it's just so normal and accepted in society that it just kind of slips right under your nose.
And not only that, but something that I've always noticed when, I remember a couple years ago, I took some time off of drinking, probably the longest I had gone. I think I was like, I think it had to be like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe now. And I was like, I was just, I don't know what it was. I think I got too drunk and too hungover. And I'm like, I'm going to try not to drink. And it was like, towards the end of the year, and in my group of friends, we have like a lot of December birthdays, a lot of January birthdays back at home, and we'd always get together for Halloween, for 4th of July, for New Year's Eve, you know what I mean? We do a Friendsgiving in November, and like all this stuff includes drinking. And so what I was going to say to piggyback on what you were saying is how it's ingrained into our society. You almost get ridiculed when you go to quit. Like that's a big, and it's like from people that love you, that they're not, they want the best for you, but it's like, I think I'm gonna stop drinking for a while, and they're like, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Like I've gotten that a lot. Like okay, you know what I mean? Like no, the first inclination, and I'm wondering if you maybe know some psychology stuff that you've looked into about this, because the first inclination I found, if you tell a group of people like, I'm gonna stop drinking, your buddies that you hang out with, always get drunk with, your closest friends, it's maybe one of the only things that those people that love you the most aren't gonna go, sounds awesome, dude, how can I help? You know what I mean? Like it's not until somebody is like pissing on themselves, blacking out, causing a scene every time they drink, or being an asshole or getting in fights with people, that then the group is like, all right, Bill can't drink anymore.
Right.
Bardia can't drink anymore. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so, do you know why that? Have you looked at anything? Why that is? Like, it makes it. I'm curious why it's one of those things. It must be like if you're not drinking, then like we can't all be degenerates together. Kind of it's like a group mentality.
Totally.
Yeah, and so that's something that I've always noticed is like even my best friends that support me. Hey, I'm starting a podcast. Awesome, dude. Keep it going.
Right.
Everything. I'm in a band. Awesome. Your pictures look great. If you're a photographer, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go, I think I'm gonna stop drinking like indefinitely for a while. They're like, I took like 3 months off one time, and like I was sober on I was the only one sober on Halloween. I was the only one and it was fun. I still had a blast. Like you have more fun than you think you're gonna have. But like it's not that they weren't in support of it, but their first inclination was to be like, nah, you're not gonna be sober, man, or like you're like come on, like like that kind of attitude.
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. I haven't looked into that specifically, but I mean, I have a bunch of different ideas.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Has that happened with your friends when you quit drinking, kind of thing? Or?
Dude, I've had a pretty problematic relationship. Like, I've always kept a pretty close, tight-knit group of friends, like 5 to 10 people over the last decade or so. And everybody's known, like, my relationship's been kind of crazy. I was a high-functioning alcoholic. So Monday through Friday, I was getting my shit done. I was doing all different types of stuff, working out, but the weekends I was getting blasted. And so
that's pretty normal too.
Yeah.
People probably think they're good. People probably think they're doing good if they're doing what you just said.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that's like a real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cuz it's sneaky.
Yeah, it's like what are we escaping? What are we running? What are we numbing from? Like, okay, Monday through Friday is great. Why do we have to go out and obliterate ourselves on the weekend?
Right.
That's a deep question that a lot of people should ask themselves. Like, are we trying to run from something? Are we trying to just make the weekends 100 times more, like, quote unquote fun?
Or is it like if we're not doing something with our hands like we are all week and we have time to just sit around or, go do stuff, then it's like yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, why do we need to be under the influence of something to enjoy ourselves on the days that we're not doing stuff with our hands, working, going to the gym, whatever? If you're just going to have 2 days to just get obliterated, And then like you said, what's the cost?
Yeah.
Factoring that in too, like physically, mentally, emotionally,
financially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To your relationships.
So what was the moment that you decided that you were like, I'm done with this? Like, was it just a bad hangover? Did you get in a fight with somebody? If you're comfortable sharing it, you don't have to.
For sure, man. So for me, like from 15 to 29, I was a weekend binge drinker. So Monday through Thursday.
15, huh?
Yeah. Kind of handled my shit. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, I would, it was hardcore binging. 3 to 4 day hangovers, and it was just that cycle for 14 years. Then when the pandemic hit, I was working from home. And anybody who I've talked to, which is a lot of people who have had a problematic relationship with alcohol to some degree, it got a lot worse during the pandemic. So I went from weekend binge drinking to 4 to 6 bottles of wine and a pack of cigarettes a day, which like it was ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
Like huge volumes of alcohol. Was getting sick, throwing up.
Sorry, how many wine bottles?
4 to 6 bottles of wine.
A day?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, man. And
just to yourself?
Yeah.
Damn, you weren't hanging out with people?
I was like, I was living with my ex at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. And so but yeah, it got to the point like the last 3 to 4 years of drinking, I didn't even really like to like last 2 years of drinking, I didn't even like to go out and drink. Like I just like to drink at home.
That's a sign that it becomes dangerous, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Which I feel like I've never really been like that. You know what I mean? Like just to try to personalize. Because like, when I hear you talk about stuff, it's like, okay, cool. I want to figure, there's all these tiers, right? Where do I fit in? Because if every alcohol user is on a different tier. Unless you're sober, it's like what everybody would want to know, kind of what tier am I on? You know what I mean? And so it's like since I moved here, I've actually been a lot happier. And I think this speaks to kind of that first thing you were saying about like figuring out what's going on that's causing you to drink. Because I would, and in Portland too, I mean, I'm not going to say Austin's not a drinking town because it definitely is.
It's wild here.
It's wild. But one thing I have noticed, it is a little bit, it's different in some way. And I don't know if that's like what I've noticed about like even people that live here, like it's not beers every night with, there's a big group of people that hang out at this apartment complex. And there's not people drinking beers on the roof every night after work. And it's like Portland is like, I don't know if it's because it's a service industry town and it's like people get off of work late, they get a shift drink, stay up all night drinking, and then they sleep all day, and then they start work late, and it's just like this like cycle.
I can see that.
You know what I mean? And they go out with other service industry people. I don't know what it is, but like it's so the thing to do there. Where it's like here, it seems like it's at least more of like a weekend thing. Like you have tech people working Monday through Friday, and then on set, and like you were saying, on the weekends they kind of go wild. The dance clubs are open or whatever, and like, here I like won't hear from like a lot of the neighbors. I'm just using this as like a control study or something. You know what I mean?
Environment makes a difference.
And so it's like, I just see less people around just drinking. And it's like, I would go up to the amenities on my roof of my last building and there's always somebody up there. You could always catch somebody up there probably with some White Claw or with some, just having a drink after work, or they work from home and it's 2:00, 3:00. And it's just like where I'm from, it's like, it's a very IPA with breakfast with brunch kind of place, like every day.
Yeah.
And the bars are always, packed every day. And it's like, I think it might be a weather thing. It's cold and rainy. People are inside a lot drinking. I'm not sure what it is, but
sure it's a combination of all
of it.
But
I'm sure that like a lot of people, there's a lot of people back home I think need help. And I guess what I'm getting at is when I moved here, and it could just be a personal thing and not an environmental thing, or it could be half and half or whatever. But like I've been more like, I'm not focused on like going to bars and having fun. That doesn't sounds like a waste of my time here. I want to work out. I want to be outside. I want to be in the sun. And like I do like to. I've been kind of doing the Monday through Friday, and then not even drinking to the point of getting drunk really on the weekends. Like it's just like that's when I'll like get a case of beer and go to the I don't know, go to the river with a couple of people or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's when I will consume any alcohol at all, and it's a lot less than I was consuming at home. So I'm interested in kind of like what that is, and it's probably that first thing you were saying, that like you have to figure out why is it that you're basically self-medicating. And I was like super unhappy. I really wanted to move here, and I was trying to convince my girlfriend at the time, and she worked different hours, and so I would basically just, if she wasn't home or she had to go to bed early, I would go out with my buddy and go to the bar down the street and drink to like almost blacking out. You know what I mean? Like I definitely was blacking out a lot before I moved here. And then I don't know, something changed. It must have just been maybe the excitement of moving, or like feeling like I achieved something, by kind of crossing that bridge to finally move out of my hometown. It's like I want to do better here, right? And so it's like, and it's not hard to do. Like this week I specifically did my homework, and I Monday through today I've been sober from alcohol. I was like, I'm meeting with Bardia. I can't be like I gotta be on my game. You know what I mean? But do you go by Bardia or Bardia? Bardia. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or B, right? You said
yeah, you can go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Bardia. My bad. But yeah. So it's like, I've noticed a change in myself that's pretty much effortless since I made a big life change.
Yeah, man.
And I don't know if that goes hand in hand with like the first thing you were saying, or or what, but
dude, yeah,
something about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody has a different relationship with it, right? Everybody has a different outlook on life, relationship with themselves, reasons why they're self-medicating, how they handle their emotions, how they look at the world, their thought processes, like their area of focus, their confidence, the possibility of hope for the future, and their ability to change or to like, create the life that they want, right? Their social life plays into it. I mean, environment plays into it. Yeah, and so I'm glad to hear that, man. On your end, but yeah, for everybody, it's a little bit different, right? And so ultimately, it's like, okay, you just kind of have to take if you think alcohol is problematic, right? Then it probably is because your mind is going there, right? It's like the thing to realize about alcohol too is that nobody gets out unscathed. Right? Like it's the whole free lunch in nature thing.
Right.
Everybody who drinks feels the effects, right? Of hangover or like having some brain fog or like not feeling 100% like the following day.
Saying some shit to somebody you didn't mean.
Yeah, saying things, doing things. So the society makes it appear almost because it's just so normal. It makes it seem like it's just part of the human experience and part of life. But drinking a substance that like creates it's a drug at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, it's like cocaine or heroin
it's
or
kind of ridiculous that it's
methamphetamines.
even legal.
Yeah. It's
when
wild.
you think about it.
Yeah,
when
I mean,
you stack it up next to all the other drugs.
Yeah. If you do Google search for, the like toxic effects of alcohol or like the damage of alcohol to society, it's at the very top. Right?
Yeah.
Like it contributes to the most amount of deaths, to the most amount of different types of diseases.
And everyone knows that.
It does the most destruction to family and to work and to the workforce and productivity because of people calling out from being hungover and all that.
Right.
I mean, it's at the very top of the list in terms of destruction to society. But
everyone knows.
Yeah, everyone knows, but we conveniently overlook it because of the euphoria that it provides.
And because of how deeply ingrained into society it is.
Yeah.
Right? So, how do you feel about people that are, like, sober from... do you even think this is a thing? Do you think that there's a lot of people that are sober from alcohol but do other drugs?
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? Or like specifically like California sober, they call it, where like
smoke weed.
Like smoke weed. Like how do you feel about, like somebody like when I said I've been sober from alcohol all week, I don't smoke as much weed as I used to, and it gets me a little too high sometimes and I just kind of get stressed out. So I really don't smoke that much, but I have been like, smoking my normal amount, like a couple hits a day or, bong rips a day or whatever. But it's like how does that factor in for you? You know what I mean? Like for you personally, and then because do you smoke weed or no?
I've smoked weed like once since being sober.
Since being sober.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was all right.
Did you used to smoke a lot when you drank, or?
Yeah, weed was never my vice. Like I did smoke like in high school, and I had periods of like spurts in my 20s where I smoked, but I never really liked it. Like alcohol was my thing, and so, yeah, like. I think when it comes to like the California sober thing, I think if you compare like apples to apples, alcohol is way more destructive on the whole human system than weed.
Absolutely.
Weed has like therapeutic benefits. It's helpful for a lot of people.
Do you think it can help people get off of alcohol? I mean, I know.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I smoked weed for about a week to help with the alcohol withdrawals.
Okay.
Nice. I mean, I was drinking like high volumes every day, and so, but then I just dropped the weed because I never really cared about it.
It wasn't that fun.
So the thing we just always have to be aware of is like, what's our intention, right? I have a friend actually who had a problematic relationship with alcohol, and then he started smoking weed, and now he's become super obsessed with weed and has had a real major problem. He's like, dude, quitting weed is way harder than alcohol for him.
Really?
And he was drinking every day, like whiskey, tons of it, and so he switched
So he just
to
has
weed.
that personality then. That
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
the addictive personality for sure, but like he switched to weed, and so now he's having a hard time getting off that. And so it always just comes down to like an individual. Like we all have to just look in the mirror and be like, okay, and if I quit drinking, is this weed thing now, am I doing it to numb? Am I doing it to escape? Am I doing it to cope? Am I doing it to run from feelings that are uncomfortable? Am I doing it to procrastinate and put off shit that I know I need to be doing?
Right.
And so again, weed's a drug. It's not nearly as bad as alcohol. In fact, it's got therapeutic benefits, and it helps a lot of people, especially if they have like chronic conditions, and it's a very mild psychedelic. So, it could make you more creative, and it can help you open up and have like these cool introspective thoughts. Mm-hmm. But then again, it's like, it's hard on the lungs, and it could be used, depending on your relationship with it, it could be used as a way to escape. And so you just have to ask yourself, like, what's my relationship to it?
So do you have clients, I guess, that are successful with people that you coach that are successful with smoking weed and getting off alcohol and still and bettering their lives then? Have you seen that happen? Or is that part of is that allowed in your program basically? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess, is that if somebody were to like be sober from everything and then like smoke weed, what, you know, how would you coach that? Would you be like,
my area of focus is helping somebody to quit drinking alcohol.
okay,
you know,
very specific.
Yeah, and help them begin the healing process and journey back home to begin addressing the underlying issues, which often just has to do with like emotional regulation, right? Like if we can regulate our emotions and we have a high load of stress that comes into our life, then we should be able to handle and discharge that stress naturally and find healthy ways to process it so we don't need to drink.
Yes.
Right? So
is there a process that you, like a curriculum that you go through that you stick to? Like the 12-step thing, is that like, is that kind of obsolete, you think, or is that?
I think it helps a lot of people. My program isn't 12-step based. It's like lifestyle transformation based. So like very routine based, and then like exposure to new information, and then like coaching and stuff like that around that. But if somebody wants to start smoking, I mean, like, I can't stop them, you know, but my whole focus is helping them get to a place where they remove the alcohol, they begin addressing the underlying issues, they start to feel incredible, connected to themselves, connected to the world, happy, clear, confident, belief in themselves, belief in hope for a better future, and to equip them and empower them with like tools and systems and strategies to be able to go out and start like fulfilling their potential.
Okay, cool.
And so where the weed thing comes in, I mean, I don't know. I think that's like.
I guess I was more asking how often. I should have asked like, how often do you see that successfully work? Like you were saying, you had the client. You had you had a client that started smoking weed, and it became yet another kind of negative
that
thing.
wasn't my client.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was a friend of mine.
That's just a friend of yours. Sorry.
Yeah. But I've had one client who has quit drinking. She's still sober, but she's like, I smoke from time to time, and it's great, and I don't feel like it's a problem, and so I'm like, cool.
Nice.
You know, if that's what works for you. Like you came to me with a problem that was, I want to quit drinking. This is like destroying me. And if we achieve that and accomplish that, like, great. If she comes back to me in 6 months and is like, Bardia, this weed thing's out of hand, then it's like, okay, maybe we look at how to address and resolve that.
Right. So how many people have you worked with, you would say, like roughly? Since you started like doing it on your own, I guess.
Yeah, probably like 40.
40? Okay. And of those, how many would you say like are, I guess, you know, cured, if you ever get cured of it, or how many have really like stayed on a good path for a long time? Or how many are like, versus how many you're still kind of working with that are still, you know, and then how often do you hear from these people, you know, that are off on their own doing it, you know, doing well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of seems like a Scout's honor kind of thing, right? Like, like
you have to be transparent.
And they're either, if they're lying to you, they're going to be lying to themselves, really, which is.
Yeah. So I have like an online community where everybody plugs in. Of the people who have come in and like truly committed and followed the process, like, you know, like a good 80%. I've had people like come in and then just like drop off after a week, but it's like, I can't force anybody. Like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink, right? If somebody's just not ready and they're not at that place, there's nothing you can do, you know? But of the people who come in and like follow the system and the process, like a good 80%, you know. There have been a couple of people who have like gotten sober and then had a drink, but it's not like I kick them out. It's like, hey, just come back to the community, come back to the process and just continue on. Yeah. It's not always 100% perfect straight line, right? Like this process of overcoming an addiction, it's not always linear. It's like there's this pretty cool photo I saw on Instagram, and it was like, you know, black background with a white circle. and the caption said like, it might feel like you're spinning in circles, but it's all about perspective, right? So you might think you're just spinning in circles, but then what it did, it put the camera on like the next slide of like above looking down, and the circle was like going up like this.
Oh, like a tornado or something.
Yeah, and so even though it felt like you were spinning in circles, like you're still making progress, right?
Yeah,
and so it's not always 100% perfect straight line, but as long as you're making the effort and doing the things necessary in order to heal and grow and develop your self-awareness and to regulate your emotions, it's like eventually you'll get there.
Yeah.
You know?
And then to go back to something that you said earlier about kind of like how once you get into that mindset of like something's not cool to go do unless there's alcohol being consumed. How do you mitigate that? You know what I mean? And before you answer that, I guess that's one of the things that drew me to want to have you on here, because I feel like for a lot of people, sobriety means gotta hang it up, gotta start being boring, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And we had a whole full conversation about random shit before we ever started talking about this at that barbecue line, and you didn't come off to me as somebody who's like either like a corny entrepreneur in bio, life coach kind of guy. Like you're just like a cool dude. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess one of the things I wanted to show by bringing you on here and letting you talk was just that like you can be sober if you need to be and be cool as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't have to like, it doesn't have to be the subject of every conversation that you have with somebody. And it's just, I feel like a lot of the role models for sobriety for people, that people have in their head are maybe not cool enough. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do you mitigate the whole, like, oh, if I have to go to this, this thing and I'm not going to drink there, then it's going to be lame. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. And inevitably, as everybody kind of like, if they approach this journey, the single biggest fear that people have of like quitting drinking is that life is going to be boring and that they have to give up their social life. So a lot of people have tried to quit drinking or to cut back, and then they find themselves bored, right? And so that's because of the alcohol, right? When you're drinking a bunch of alcohol, it lowers your baseline level of dopamine. And so everything else that's not alcohol seems dull, because you've trained your system to only get that euphoric hit.
It's like a peaks and valleys kind of
thing.
Right?
You've trained your system to get it from alcohol. And so people try to quit drinking for 2 weeks or 30 days and they're like, this is fucking boring, right?
Right.
But you have to wait it out long enough for your dopamine levels to come back to where you can start deriving fulfillment and pleasure from everyday normal activities, right? Yeah. But most people don't get there. The second thing is like the social life. And so in early sobriety, right, if you're really trying to quit drinking because you realize this thing is detrimental and it's holding you back from becoming the person that you want and living the life that you want, you have to optimize for sobriety, right? And so the first...
What do you mean by that? Explain what you mean.
You have to look at the next few months of your life through the lens of, does this support my sobriety, or is this going to put me at risk to want to drink again and fall back? Yeah, you have to make adjustments.
To who you're hanging out with, what you're doing.
Who you're hanging out with, where you're going, like what your triggers are. If you're constantly going to this bar or you're constantly hanging out with this person and all you do is drink, like you probably have to distance yourself from them for a little while until you build a strong enough foundation where you're starting to heal, you're starting to grow, you're starting to feel more confident in who you are, your identity, your decisions, so that when you do get into those situations, you don't drink, like you have the confidence. Yeah. And so, how do you handle those things? It doesn't mean your social life is over. You can still do everything that you would possibly do.
Does it mean you kind of have to maybe cut some certain people off, though, sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, depending on your context and your situation, you probably have to distance yourself from certain people. You may not need to look at acquiring a new set of friends.
Do you think in turn that ends up kind of cutting the fat from who your real friends are and who, I don't know if you maybe experienced this, but like who your friends are, because who your real friends are versus who your friends are when you're
drinking buddies are.
Because I feel like sometimes there's a difference there where some people that I've noticed, will go out a lot and drink. And I used to I used to definitely probably have a few people like this where it's like once we stopped, if I'm trying not to drink, like there's no reason for us to hang out because that's what we did. You know what I mean? And then there's always that thing where it's like once you stop drinking, you're like, do I even really like what do we even have in common?
100%.
You know what I mean? Did you run into that when you like made your big stop drinking or?
With me, not specifically, but I know it's common for everybody, right? Like, again, I always have kept like a pretty core group of friends, and they were always supportive regardless of what I was doing. And so when I quit, they were supportive of that. But I know a lot of people run into that. Most people, almost everybody. And so, you really start to see and make a distinction between who are my drinking buddies and who are my real friends, right? Because if they're a real friend and you have a deeper level of connection that goes deeper than just alcohol and bars and partying, then they're going to check up on you. You're going to hop on calls together. You might still go on hikes together. You're going to meet up. Like the friendship, the fabric is still there. And if they care about you enough, they'll still make an effort to be like, hey man, even if they drink, they'll be like, all right, well, you're not drinking, so let's go do this instead. This doesn't involve alcohol, So that distinction gets made, and there again, that's scary for a lot of people, right? Because if the primary fabric of their social circle is all people who just drink, it's like, well, now giving up alcohol means I give up everything. I give up my friendship, my relationships, and again, that's scary. And so that makes people trapped.
Bigger mountain to climb.
Yeah, it keeps people trapped. Yeah, because we're social creatures, right? And so,
so how do you do with do you go out to bars and stuff and hang out with your friends while they drink, or are you kind of more, and I know this is probably going to be, or no, I guess I'm curious, do you think this is a subjective thing, or do you think it's fairly objective for people with problems that they shouldn't maybe go out to these gatherings where there's going to be, where the main thing is people drinking, what do you suggest for that?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's person to person, or, because I feel like before you answer, I feel like there's a lot of it's hard to distinguish what's subjective and objective here. Like, what is a person-to-person thing and what is chemically happening to your brain? You know what I mean? And so, I feel like that's why I'm asking some of these questions, because some of it is, unclear, whether is this something we can skirt the rules on, and can I go out with people, not me personally, but, can someone go out with somebody if they have a problem? Maybe after a while they can start going out and still not be triggered into drinking and relapsing, or is that just something that's you shouldn't go out and put yourself in these situations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for the first few months, you should avoid it as much as you can, because in order to get to a place where you build a foundation for yourself, where you start to feel more confident in your sobriety, if you constantly keep putting yourself dude, it's hard enough to quit drinking, It's not easy, right? It's that's why 12-step groups exist. That's why most people who try fail on their own. It's why
it's hard to say no to your friends.
Somebody like myself exists. You need support. You need a system. You need accountability. You need structure, right? And so in the beginning, you should probably tend to avoid it. Over time, I think you can go back and do it. But the thing that happens with everybody who quits drinking is that your values change as a person. So what you find interesting, what you find fun, you're almost forced to. It's an adaptation. It's a biological adaptation, right?
Right.
So before, your values were going to the bar, going to the clubs, doing the things that involve alcohol. That's your idea of fun. That's how you derive your pleasure and fulfillment.
Right.
When you quit drinking, over time, your values are forced to change. So, for example, I'll still go out with people to a bar, but whereas they would stay until 12 or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm there for an hour, hour and a half. I have conversations, I chill with people, then I go home. Because you start to notice after the third and fourth drink, people start to slur their words, the quality of the conversation starts to diminish, people are laughing at things that aren't that funny anymore, things are getting rowdy, things are changing. And when you're the one that's sober and you can watch the fabric and personality of somebody shift, you just realize like, yeah, I'm not doing this, so this isn't fun for me, right? And so you drive home, you don't have to worry about drinking and driving, you save a bunch of money on alcohol, and then you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning feeling great.
Right.
You know, whereas everybody else isn't. And like, again, it's not a judgment, it's just a personal decision, right? But
these are the facts.
Yeah, your values change, right? And so you discover new ways to grow and to enjoy yourself and to find fulfillment. And like,
because we're seeking dopamine naturally, right?
Yeah. And so the big thing, and like where I come in as a coach, is like, and this is what we've been meant to do as human beings the entire time. Like, I feel like the human journey is a process of uncovering and discovering and fulfilling your potential, right? Discovering who can Taylor be, right? Like, what's your capability, right? Like, where do you want to live? What do you want your life to look like, right? We weren't meant to just be born and then spend 50% of our time drinking a toxic poison that slowly commits a slow suicide, right? We weren't meant to drink something that constantly makes us feel euphoric at the expense of everything else in our life, right? So once we remove the alcohol piece, then it's like, okay, what do you actually want? What's the ideal life, career, relationship,
physical
health,
and mental health,
yeah, all those things. And then let's start working towards that, because as we start making progress towards those things, the natural fulfillment that we receive from the progress we're making and like the growth that we're experiencing, that keeps us sober.
Whether it's your business or like, for me, like photography or something. I definitely
music, photography, creative outlets, hobbies, like all the things that you thought were cool and interesting when you were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 years old, before you started drinking, and then you started prioritizing bars and alcohol, like all of those things that you thought were cool, the things that you feel naturally aligned or gravitated towards. It finally gives you time to begin exploring those, because one thing that a lot of people who have a problematic relationship with alcohol discover is how much time you get back. So if you're drinking 3 or 4 days a week, let's say, and each of those days is 5 hours, that's 20 hours a week, that's 80 hours a month, that's 960 hours a year, right? Like the amount of it's insane. I mean, you could...
And you're not doing really anything productive while you're drinking.
You're doing nothing productive. You're just you're sitting there in a room, like there's just time is passing.
Even if you're having good conversations with people, they're ones you're probably going to forget. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many thousands.
You're not going to retain information.
How many thousands of phone numbers I got in my 20s of conversations I met with people at bars and parties. Be like, dude, we're going to hang out. I'll see you next week. And you just never call those people when you wake up.
Yeah, that is a real one.
Hundreds of phone numbers I've collected.
I think I still have them all. I think I need to go through my phone. I have like 7 Andys. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Who are these people?
Yeah, and you think like you get into these conversations and you start talking, all this stuff, and
alcohol seems to become a common denominator for people to be friends, and it's not. Like it's like, oh, I met this guy. We were at the bar. Like, there's so many other things that check boxes that need to be checked before you know if a person has the same interests as you and all this stuff. But when you're drinking, none of that shit really matters.
Nothing.
Which some people could say is positive because it make you, more like be a social lubricant or whatever. But really, you're making. One could argue that you're making meaningless relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know how many like worthwhile relationships just came from people meeting each other at bars. And
I'm sure there's some.
I bet you this factors into why meeting girls at bars or guys at bars or whatever you're into, if you're whomever, is not a fruitful way to like the people that we know that have the most relationship problems, where they meet people and then it's great at first and they break up, and this is like a pattern that they keep happening, keep happening to them. It's like they're always meeting them at bars. They're like, I gotta stop meeting people at bars, man. I just got, you know what I mean? Like, and it is kind of hard to meet people nowadays with the internet and stuff. But it's like that. Maybe that speaks to why it's difficult for those folks that are always finding love in bars. You know what I mean? Like, to keep meaningful relationships, because your whole, the whole reason that you guys met in the first place was predicated on something that
Yeah, totally.
Doesn't mean anything.
Your values and standards as a person with a sober mind are entirely different than when you're drinking, right? So like, and I had recorded a video on this a while back, but like you go on a date with somebody, right? You don't know, you meet them through an app as an example. And if the first thing you do is you go get drunk together, well, because of the nature of alcohol and the way that affects your brain, it, lowers your standards a lot of times, right? We all know this. Maybe we do things, whatever, like that we normally wouldn't, right? Like you're not noticing the red flags. Things are becoming funnier when maybe they're not that funny. Beer goggles are coming on, right? So when the relationship starts that way, you're not like truly making an authentic connection, right? It's based off of the artificial synthetic euphoria that you have on alcohol. That's why, like, it doesn't matter who you're with or who you're sitting next to. If you're drunk, you're having a party, right? Like it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, if that connection is based off of that, and then you continue on, I mean, red flags start to come up, but then you deal with it.
Or even more simply put, you're hanging out with somebody in a room in the morning, and they say some shit to you, and you're just like, do I even like this person? Like, I don't even like.
I don't even really know.
Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, exactly. And so that's interesting because I think a lot of people have that problem where they kind of have fake friendships that they don't even know are fake friendships, just because they're they evolve in a bar.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And because we've been doing it since we were in high school, and we haven't really, to the degree that everybody maybe has the potential for, developed our social skills, now you have a huge population of people who have social anxiety who don't even feel like they can go up to somebody they haven't met before and get to know them, a stranger, without drinking, right? I mean, think about it. You start drinking when you're 16, 17 years old, and then it goes on into college, and then all of a sudden you're dumped up out of college, and now you're 25, and it's like...
Which is a deeper problem, because that means that you can't feel comfortable making friends unless you're not even the real version of yourself.
Right.
You have to be a fake version of yourself to go out and make friends. So the whole social lubricant idea one could argue is super unhealthy and toxic.
It definitely can be.
Yeah.
If it's being abused and it's being used as a crutch.
Yeah.
Right? Like, ultimately what we should aim to do is we should address all the underlying issues. Like, okay, if you have social anxiety, like, okay, let's work on that, right? What do we need to do to work on that?
What would you suggest? Like, where would you start if you were kind of probing somebody about having social anxiety and they were using drinking as a, way to circumvent that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, where would you start with this person? If I say, hey, Bardia, I just feel like I can't, this is not me talking either, but just, you know what I mean? Like, I can't go out and meet new people. I'm in a new city where I don't know anybody, and I feel like, unless I'm drinking, like, I can't talk to these people. Like, what kind of advice would you give? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, depending on where we're starting from and like how severe it is, if it's super severe, I'd have you practice visualizing going up and meeting somebody and saying hi.
Right.
100 times in your brain, and imagining them smiling back at you and saying hi back. Right. So like, if it's super severe, you can start with a visualization practice. But then beyond that, and this goes with almost anything, overcoming any fear and anxiety, and it's like a real common sort of technique used in psychotherapy or psychology, and it's exposure therapy, right? So we just need to incrementally expose ourselves to the thing that we're afraid of to get new positive feedback from the environment that's either neutral or positive, to send new data back into the human system to let us know that this thing that we're afraid of is actually safe or neutral.
Right.
So it's somewhere along the line we develop social anxiety. It dysregulates our nervous system. So when we think about social experiences, we go into a state of fight or flight, and we get high stress and adrenaline. Right. So what we do in order to begin alleviating that is we need to make incremental exposure to social experiences and get neutral or positive feedback that says, hey, this is actually safe, and that will begin to calm the system.
And I
right?
mean,
So
it's
a super practical way is like, okay, from now on, Taylor, every time you go to the store, the drugstore, the grocery store, look at the guy the person cash register, look him in the eye and ask him, hi, how are you today?
Right.
And then come up with like a little script. I'm doing well. Thank you. Nice weather we're having today, right? So like literally practice making small talk. And then from there, that can continue to expand, right? And then there's the different psychological aspects of like, okay, maybe some people who have social anxiety think that people are judging them all the time, right? So
that's something I've heard before, or I've heard from friends that have that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the reality is like nobody is, and nobody gives a fuck, right? But we experience something in our childhood, or our parents say something to us, and now we're afraid of everybody, and we're afraid of the world. But so that's where we would come in on a coaching thing and like help remodel and reshape like our belief systems towards certain things. But incremental exposure to anything that we're fearful of or anxious of over time will allow us to become more comfortable with that thing. It'll help calm the system. We practice it enough times, and then it becomes second nature. And then once you do it, you realize that it was never that scary to begin with. We suffer more in imagination than reality. It's just ourselves constantly creating narrations and stories about what we think is going to happen, and painting the pain and lens of our past into the present moment, thinking that the trauma and the pain and the ridicule and the embarrassment that we experience as a kid or with our parents or at school is going to happen as a 25, 30, 40-year-old adult when we have to give a presentation at work. Right? But that's not the case. But because we don't have this level of self-awareness, and we have no map of reality and how our minds and thoughts and brains and nervous system works, we're just this awake consciousness trapped in the system that we don't know how to manage, and it becomes overwhelming and it becomes stressful, and so we drink.
Yeah, that's profound. So you really have to practice it if you have some kind of social anxiety. And I wonder if, and you may not know the answer to this, but it's like when you start practicing stuff like that. And I mean, I'm blessed with the social, but I have a social, I have good skills with that. I've always been people told me to shut up and stop talking my whole life. And I've always been a person that was able to make friends easily, but I know a lot of people aren't. So, hopefully this can help somebody that's listening. But
yeah, for sure.
It seems like after, being victorious, if you will, or succeeding in like these practice rounds of doing social things that don't involve drinking, if you're trying to get sober and have less social anxiety, those could maybe take the place of that dopamine that the alcohol was giving you. Because like when we walk away from this podcast, I'm gonna be like, that was awesome, dude, we had a great talk, we learned a lot from Bardia. You know what I mean? Like you get you can maybe learn to replace that dopamine, right? I mean, would you
100%.
say that it's something that you've noticed or seen work with someone?
That's exactly what it is, right? Like Tony Robbins says, how do you define happiness? Happiness is progress. Happiness is tied to progress. So as a human being, as all human beings, we are designed to progress and evolve in our life. A lot of people kind of maybe don't think about that, or they've forgotten that, right? Why did we go through school? Why did we get an education? Why did we learn language? Why did we learn math? Why did we learn all these subjects? So that we can expand and evolve our map of ourselves and the world, so that we can have more control over our life to create the experience of reality that we want. And so dopamine is directly tied to progress. So when we remove the alcohol, now we just need to begin to get clear. And it doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes it takes months for people to discover what this is, right? But as long as you're curious and you're committed to it, and you try enough things, and you follow the path, yeah, you'll begin to discover things that are aligned with you. And as you begin to see progress, like going to the gym is a good example, right? When you quit drinking, you can finally be consistent and hit the gym 5-6 days a week.
Right.
And as you start to see you take your shirt off, you look good, your physique is coming in, your biceps are getting bigger.
The alcohol weight drops quick. People don't realize too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
super
as soon
quick.
as you stop drinking alcohol even when I stopped drinking just for Monday through Friday, I look different. My body just changes in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, the composition changes quick. So when you start to see that progress, that gives you fulfillment. You're like, dude, fuck yeah, like let's keep going. You know, and that should happen in every area of your life. Your relationships will get better, the communication, the depth, the quality of the relationships, work should get better, productivity gets better, you'll move up, you'll get a raise, right? You become a better leader, your communication skills improve. You know, you find new ways to have fun, you're trying new interests, new activities, new hobbies. And yeah, man, like the progress that you naturally feel from all these other endeavors will make life fulfilling and enjoyable.
They're gonna give you that dopamine rush that you're craving and basically dependent on alcohol for in one way or another. Mm-hmm. So what would you know? You know, what would you say is, because you're saying that you have to figure out, you have to isolate kind of what underlying things are causing you to drink. That, you know, that's the foundation here. What do you think is the most popular one, or if you will, or like the most notorious reason that people do this? Is it trauma? Is it like, just let's take the 40 people that you've worked with. You know, what's the common denominator between all of them?
Childhood trauma.
Childhood trauma.
Yeah. And everybody experiences childhood trauma, right? Even if you grow up in like a good family and you guys have money and like they take you to sports, like
someone yelled at you one time.
Yeah, trauma is basically, it happens easily in children because the brain is still developing. You have a very low tolerance for stress. And so trauma is anything that exceeds the normal stress response window. So if anything is overly like causes too much stress or too much adrenaline, that's a form of trauma.
Okay.
Right. And so as kids, you don't have the cognitive capacity to understand that maybe when you've been working on this art project all week at school and then you come and you show it to your mom and you're super excited and you're 8 years old and your mom tells you to like fuck off and go to your room. And then now that's a traumatic experience. You don't have,
even if it's not getting beaten or something
that's traumatic, because what's happened is you don't have the cognitive capacity to realize that your mom's on the phone and she's stressed out about something and that you should wait to talk to her when she's done. And so you're like, mom, and she's like, fuck off or something, right? And you as a kid, your map of reality is that I've been pouring my heart and soul into this art project, and all I wanted to do was show the person that I love and get validation and acceptance for my creativity and hard work. Now, when your mom tells you to fuck off, you construct a meaning that I must not be good enough, I must not be lovable enough,
just go down the rabbit
I'm not worthy, and that it is not safe to express my authentic creative expression.
Crazy. Has that been a real thing? Is that like a real example?
Yeah, for sure.
From somebody that you've worked with or something?
Yeah.
You guys dug deep and found out that was something that was attributing to the trauma, that was attributing to them wanting to drink or something like that?
Yeah, man. Like, it shows up in so many different ways,
so
right?
You got to be careful how you treat your kids.
Dude, it's the biggest thing.
Because they could grow up and become alcohol abusers if you don't give them that, if you don't give them a second.
Dude, yeah, I mean, I've always said, like, and there's no way to really like manage and regulate this, but it's like there should be some sort of test that parents go through to show that they're equipped to be able to have children.
Yeah, patient enough. Oh yeah, I've always agreed.
Emotionally regulated, they have the means, they understand the psychological developmental process of a child and what they need, how to empower them.
It would have to not be IQ related, because there's still people with low IQs out there that are good parents, that raise their kids well, that are loving parents, understanding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't have to be a genius.
Yeah, you don't have to be a genius.
But there should definitely be something. We got to work something out.
Yeah.
Because people are having kids.
Yeah, it's just generation after generation just pouring their shit, into...
What's the age ranges of the people that you work with? You know what I mean? Like
23 to like 62.
62. Okay. And what differences do you see there, or similarities between age ranges? You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm just genuinely curious about.
For sure.
I guess this isn't my time to ask questions. So.
Similarities, A lot of similarities across the board. Younger people tend to feel a little bit more invincible and feel like they have time on their hands, whereas people who are older and feeling the real cost and detrimental effects of alcohol to their liver and to, just the whole thing, they're just tired. They're tired of the cycle for 20, 30, 40 years.
They're tired of having to get a six-pack before work to not have withdrawals or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the younger side, a little bit like more excitement about it, but
about what? About drinking or about getting sober?
About drinking.
Okay.
It's
I get what you're saying.
It poses different challenges, right? When you're younger, you have the social aspect to deal with, whereas like when you're a little bit older, like that's not as important to you. Health is more focused. Longevity, time, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's certainly similarities and differences there.
Who's more successful, do you think? Do you think younger people are more successful at kicking it, or do you think older people with health problems are? Because like in the situation of my friend who just passed, he was a couple years older than me, mid to late 30s, and I don't know. I don't. It didn't. He last time I saw him a month before I left. You know what I mean, or whatever. And 3 weeks before I moved out here, and then it was just like he was like, "Yeah, I'm doing fine." You know what I mean? It was like hidden in plain sight kind of thing. And so I'm wondering, who is more successful, or what's the success rate with people that are older versus and quitting it for health, because he obviously had to quit for health reasons as he was a little older than me. You know what I mean? And so he wasn't probably concerned with the longevity so much, maybe until a doctor told him. I don't know. I'm just speculating here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough that you would think if you're 60-some years old and you're like, you're going to die if you keep drinking like this. And if you stop, you can maybe live for 10 more years. It's like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you find that younger people are more likely to, bite the bullet and like stick to it, or do you think that older people with all the social challenges that it imposes, or do you think the older people are more likely to quit because of their health problems? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if
there might not be an answer.
I don't have a data set for it specifically. I think you could argue both sides.
It really depends on the person,
and it depends on the person. Yeah,
for instance, I've got
quitting drinking isn't just about physically stopping. It has to do with all of the emotional side of it. The social side, like it's so multifaceted.
I've got somebody in my family, like my immediate family, not my parents, but one of their siblings, and they've just like ruined their whole life because of it, and their relationship with their family, and like they just still like won't quit. You know what I mean? And like it's like the party's not over. You know what I mean? And it just gets worse and worse, and then they'll quit, and like it's amazing what happens when they quit and they get into it, and then they're always going back. You know what I mean? And it's like I just don't know what. I'm curious as to what keeps a person, like when their whole life is you get your wife kicks you out of the house and gives you divorce papers, your kids don't want to talk to you, you know what I mean? Like you can't see your kid doesn't want their new baby to see you, you know what I mean? Like and these are all very personal, like real situations that happened in my family. So I'm just curious, and I mean maybe that's another reason I wanted to talk to you about it, is it does run in like one of the sides of my family, like and there's a lot of alcoholism there. But what I wonder what, I don't know, what keeps a person from making those when it's that bad, when it's like, you can't ignore this anymore. This isn't me or you, this isn't me saying, oh, I just want to drink less during the week to watch my weight, to feel better, to have them be more productive. It's way beyond that. This is like a disease with this person. And it's like, what, they could just go to treatment. They have all the options, but they choose still to drink. Yeah,
man. That's the $1 million question, right? It's like it's hard to blanket that statement without. I mean, it just comes down to how they process reality.
Yeah.
right?
And I mean, we can just speak generally here and just brainstorm. You know what I mean? I'm curious to just hear your thoughts. I don't need like a scientific answer, but I'm just curious why won't a person just, why can't they see it? Why can't they, or, they can't not see it. Mm-hmm. So they're choosing to ignore it, or maybe they're turning to alcohol to medicate the fact that they're such a fuck up and, such a piece of shit. And then a lot of the times with, this particular person I'm talking about in my family, it's like, it'll always go back to, oh, I'm just a piece of shit. But you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a cycle.
It's a cycle, man. Yeah. It's a trap.
It is.
There's a good quote by this, famous psychologist named Carl Jung. And, it goes something like, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to confront facing their own soul.
In order to confront facing their
own? In order to avoid facing their, confronting or facing their own soul. And so, yeah, man, I mean, it's multi-layered.
So they'll do mental gymnastics, in other words.
They'll do anything.
To push that confrontation with yourself back.
Yeah, the pain, right? Like all of it.
Because that's part of that whole like 12-step thing, right? Is going around and like apologizing to people, right?
Yeah, it's one of the steps.
And that could be pretty difficult. And a lot of these folks, like, I wonder how much they black out and don't even know that they've done these terrible things, and how hard it is to even believe sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I did what? You know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah. And it's like...
Yeah, and I want to touch on what you just said. Like, that's probably pretty difficult, right? And so difficulty is almost synonymous with pain, right? All this comes back to a person's unwillingness to confront their pain.
Okay.
The reason, and when we don't do that, when we don't allow ourselves to confront the pain, whatever that source of pain is,
whether it's
childhood trauma, abuse, narcissistic relationship, like it can come in so many different ways. When we don't allow ourselves to feel the pain, it never releases, it never discharges from our body, right? Pain and emotion is energy in motion, right? We're somehow conditioned to believe that we only want to feel the good spectrum of emotions, and the painful spectrum of guilt and shame and anger and resentment and heartbreak and sadness and fear. Like, we don't want to revisit those. But the way that we allow those to discharge from our body is by allowing ourselves to feel it. And then as we feel it, begin developing a reframed perspective about how it happened and what it meant. We have to construct and assign new meaning to it. Because if the old meaning is rooted in unworthiness and distrust and all of the things that keep us down, then we will continue to perpetuate that. So it's like this is a process of making the unconscious conscious, the things that we've suppressed and repressed, bring those to the surface, have the courage and willingness to feel the pain, reconstruct and redefine that meaning, and then move forward in a way that empowers us.
And that's healthy.
Yeah, in a way that's healthy. And if we keep it at arm's distance, any sort of pain that we feel, that pain will continue to bubble and boil and eventually explode in a way that's unhealthy.
Right.
We freak out, you start yelling, we start screaming, when somebody triggers us, we lose our shit. You know, we drink, we do cocaine, like whatever it might be.
Interesting. So how much do you think of this as like hereditary versus how much do you think it's behavioral or versus environmental, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I know the hereditary thing is definitely real. It's proven. So certain people are predisposed to addiction, and their chemistry and their brain is wired a little bit differently to not have an off button when it comes to seeking like dopamine.
Okay.
And when you get these absorbent amounts of dopamine and serotonin rush from alcohol or Molly or cocaine or whatever, there's no off button, right? And that's like what a binge drinker is. It's like myself, right? It's like I can't just have one. Something triggers and I just can't do it. And people who don't have that gene, they don't get it. They're like, dude, just fucking stop, just slow down. And it's like, yeah, that's not how it works.
Right.
You know,
you were able to turn it off, but it's either on or off.
Yeah,
it's off Monday through Friday, and then as soon as you clock out of work, that sucker's on all weekend for you.
Yeah, if I have one, it would turn on.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. How long has it been since you had a drink? You said 2 years.
2 years.
Nice. When was it? Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks, man.
When was the 2-year mark?
Last Wednesday.
Last Wednesday. What did you do to celebrate?
Went out to dinner.
Nice. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we covered most of the stuff that I wanted to talk to you about. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say? Anything else you wanted to include and speak about?
Not really, man. I think we covered a lot of really good stuff. This was an awesome podcast.
It was awesome, dude. Yeah.
If you want to follow me, you can find me on TikTok. My handle
tell
is
everybody what that is.
Stop Drinking Coach. If you want to find me on Instagram, it's the Stop Drinking Coach.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
Straight to the point.
Yeah. You can check out my website, www.thestopdrinkingcoach.com. And I also have a podcast that I recently launched. It's on Spotify and Apple. The Stop Drinking Coach. You can search that.
It's very simple. Bardia, you're a very insightful dude, and you're awesome to talk to, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast, dude.
Man, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
dude.
absolutely, man.
Cool.
That's a wrap.